The day my parents chose her over me, they didn't even look me in the eye. My mother straightened the collar of her dress, this girl, this stranger, and smiled at her the way she had never once smiled at me. Soft. Proud. Like she was looking at something precious. I stood 3 feet away, holding an acceptance letter from the top university in the country. My name printed in bold. A full scholarship. 3 years of sacrifice, bleeding through every line of that paper. My father glanced at it. Just glanced. Then looked back at her. Mia worked very hard this semester too, he said. That was it. That was my celebration. Her name was Mia. And she had been living in my house for 4 months. Let me take you back, because this story doesn't start with her. It starts with me. With who I was before they decided I wasn't enough. My name is Raina. I was the only child of the Calloway family for 19 years. Not a wealthy family, comfortable. Respected in our town. My father ran a mid-size import business. My mother sat on the board of 2 local charities. We weren't rich, but we had a name. And that name meant something. I was the one carrying it forward. Top of every class. Student council. Regional debate champion. I didn't do it for applause. I did it because I believed, genuinely believed, that one day my parents would look at me and say, "We are so proud of you." I'm still waiting for that day. Because 4 months before my 19th birthday, a girl showed up at our door with a manila envelope and a story that changed everything. She said her name was Mia Calloway. She said she was my parents' biological daughter, the child they had given up for adoption 18 years ago before I was born. Before they had money. Before the business. Before the name meant anything. She had documents. A birth certificate. An agency record. DNA paperwork. And my parents, the 2 people who raised me, fed me, told me I was their world, looked at those papers and fell apart at the seams. They cried. They held her. My mother kept touching her face, like she was trying to make sure she was real. No one touched my face. I stood in the hallway of my own home and watched my family become someone else's. I told myself it would be okay. I told myself I was being selfish. She was their blood. Of course they were emotional. Of course this was overwhelming. I would adjust. We would adjust. This was just a hard season. I believed that for exactly 6 weeks. 6 weeks of watching Mia settle into our house, like she had always lived there. 6 weeks of my mother redecorating the guest room, then giving Mia my old room because it was bigger and had better light. 6 weeks of dinners where every conversation circled back to Mia, her childhood, her struggles, how brave she was, how strong. 6 weeks of being invisible in the house where I grew up. And then the university situation happened. I had been accepted, full scholarship to Hargrove University. Architecture program. The best in the region. I had applied, interviewed, and earned it over 3 years of calculated, deliberate work. My parents had always said, when you get in, we'll celebrate. We'll help you get set up. We'll make sure you have everything you need. The week I got my acceptance letter, Mia also applied, late, to a private arts college across the city. She didn't get a scholarship. The tuition was $40,000 a year. My parents paid it without blinking. When I asked about my move-in costs, a few $100s for supplies, my father said they were stretched thin right now. I did the math in my head, standing in the kitchen. $40,000 versus a few hundred. And they were stretched thin. I didn't cry. I had learned by then that crying in front of them accomplished nothing. I just nodded and said I'd figure it out. That night I heard my mother telling Mia she was so glad she finally had a daughter who felt like hers. I packed a bag. Not everything, just what I needed. My documents. My laptop. The small amount I had saved from tutoring. I left a note on the kitchen table. 3 sentences. I heard what you said. I won't make this harder for you. Don't look for me. I walked out of that house at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was 19 years old. I had $340 in my account and a scholarship to the best architecture school in the region. I had nothing else. Or so they thought. What my parents never knew, what I never told them because I never thought it mattered, was that my grandmother had left me something. My father's mother. Eleanor Calloway. She passed when I was 15. We weren't close in the way people describe closeness. She wasn't warm, she didn't bake cookies, she didn't call on birthdays. But she watched me. Every family gathering, every holiday, every school event she attended in the back row, she watched me with this expression I never fully understood. Like she was waiting to see what I'd become. She left me a letter. And a key. My parents had been the executors of her estate, so they handled everything. They told me she left me a small sentimental amount, a few pieces of jewelry, some old books. They gave me a box. I packed it and stored it and forgot about it because I was 15 and grieving and didn't know how to ask questions yet. The letter stayed in that box for 4 years. I read it the night I left home, sitting in my car in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner at midnight. My grandmother had not left me jewelry and old books. She had left me controlling shares in Calloway and Marsh, the original company my grandfather had built before my father inherited a restructured, smaller version of it. The original company had been quietly reestablished under a holding group. Eleanor had never dissolved it. She had been running it through a proxy for 12 years. She left it to me. All of it. The letter said, "You were always the one who paid attention. Use it wisely. The key opens a safe deposit box at First Meridian Bank. Don't let them shrink you, Reina. You come from more than they ever showed you." The key was in the box with the jewelry. I sat in that parking lot for a long time. Then I ordered coffee, opened my laptop, and started paying attention. The next 2 years, I disappeared. Not literally, I was at Hargrove. I was finishing my degree. I was doing what I had always done, working, building, learning. But I was also doing something else. Something quiet and deliberate and deeply satisfying. I was learning the business my grandmother left me. The safe deposit box held documents, account records, a letter of introduction to a woman named Constance Marsh, the co-founder's granddaughter, who had been managing the holding company and waiting, patiently to be contacted by Aliner's heir. Constance was 63 years old, sharp as a blade, and she looked at me across a mahogany table and said, "You're late. But you're here. That's what matters." She became my mentor. My education had been academic, hers was surgical. She taught me how capital moves, how boards are structured, how you acquire without announcing yourself, how silence is a strategy. I graduated from Hargrove with honors. I won a regional design competition that got my name in 3 industry publications. I turned down 2 job offers because I didn't need them. By the time I was 22, Callaway and Marsh, under my quiet direction, had acquired a minority stake in a real estate development group, 2 mid-size retail properties, and a consulting firm that worked with exactly the kind of import businesses my father ran. I knew what I was building. I wasn't in a hurry. I also knew what was happening at home, because small towns talk, and my father's business was struggling. The import market had shifted. He had made some bad decisions. He had taken on a partner who wasn't delivering. The business that had given our family its name was quietly contracting. And Mia, the daughter they had chosen, had dropped out of arts college after 1 year. She was living at home. She had started a lifestyle brand that my mother was funding. It had 14 followers on its best day. They were not doing well. I was. The first time I saw Mia again, she didn't recognize me. That's the part I still think about. I was attending a Chamber of Commerce dinner in the city. Constance had introduced me to the host, a developer we were in early conversations with. I was there as a representative of the holding group. Professional. Quiet. Composed. Mia was there because my mother had gotten her a +1 invitation through a charity connection. She walked in wearing a dress that still had the tag carefully folded inside the collar. I noticed because I noticed things, and spent the first hour of the evening taking photos for her lifestyle brand account. We ended up at adjacent tables. She looked at me the way people look at someone vaguely familiar, a flicker, then nothing. She turned back to her phone. The host, in his opening remarks, mentioned several guests by name. He mentioned me. He said, "Reina Callaway, who I think many of you will be hearing a great deal more from, representing Callaway and Marsh Holdings." Mia's head came up slowly. I watched her process it. The name. The company name. Callaway. She looked at me again. This time, the recognition landed. I held her gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Then I turned back to my conversation. I didn't speak to her that evening. I didn't need to. The introduction had already done everything I needed it to do. By the next morning, I had 3 missed calls from my mother's number. I didn't answer. A week after the dinner, I got a call from my father. He had found my number through a mutual contact, someone from town who had seen my name in a local business feature. He didn't lead with an apology. He led with a problem. His import business had a contract dispute with a supplier, a company that had been underpaying on delivery quotas for 2 quarters and refusing arbitration. He was going to lose the contract and couldn't afford the legal battle. He was calling because he had heard secondhand that I was in business now, and did I know anyone who could help? Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I missed you." Not even, "How are you?" Just, "Do you know anyone who can help?" I was quiet on the phone for a moment. Then I said, "Send me the contract documents." He hesitated. "Reina, I don't want charity." "It's not charity. Send me the documents." He sent them. I reviewed them that evening. The supplier company, I knew it. Not personally, but by name. It had come across my desk 3 months earlier as a potential acquisition target for a partner group, Constance, and I had been advising. The company was over-leveraged and quietly looking for an exit. They were playing hardball with my father's contract because they needed the cash flow, not because they had legal standing. I made 2 calls. The first was to the acquisition partner. I suggested they accelerate their interest and move to a letter of intent. I noted casually that the target company had active contract disputes that could complicate due diligence if not resolved. The second call was to a lawyer in my network. Within 10 days, the supplier had dropped the dispute and settled quietly. My father's contract was restored. He called me again. "How did you do that?" I said I paid attention. He went quiet. I think he was starting to understand that he didn't actually know who I was anymore. "Good. Mia, it turned out, was not simply going to fade into the background. After the chamber dinner, she had gone home and told my parents everything she'd seen. And my mother, who had spent 2 years funding a failing lifestyle brand, who was quietly watching their finances strain, had made a decision. She called Constance. Not me. Constance. She had found the company name, found the registered contact, and called the office directly asking to speak to someone about a family matter regarding a company asset. Constance told me about the call with the particular stillness she reserved for things she found genuinely interesting. She said my mother had implied that as a parent, she might have a claim, emotional if not legal, to be included in any decisions involving the Calloway name. She had also implied that Mia, as a biological Calloway, might have some standing. I sat with that for a moment. What did you tell her? I asked. Constance smiled. I told her I'd pass along the message. She slid a manila folder across the desk. I also had our legal team pull the original estate documentation. Your grandmother was meticulous, Reina. There is no ambiguity. There is no claim. I opened the folder. Alina's handwriting in the margin notes was still sharp and deliberate even at 80. She also, Constance added, explicitly excluded your father from the estate on grounds of what she called consistent smallness of character. I thought you'd want to know that. I closed the folder. Schedule a meeting, I said. Invite my mother. And Mia. Constance raised an eyebrow. It's time, I said. They arrived together. My mother wore her charity gala clothes, the ones she wore when she wanted to seem important. Mia wore something that looked expensive but wasn't. I noticed the seams. I wore nothing special. I sat at the head of the conference table and did not stand when they walked in. My mother looked around the office, the real office with the city view and the dark wood, and the staff moving quietly in the background, and I watched her recalibrate. This was not what she had expected. She had expected something small. Something she could manage. I let them sit. I let the silence run for a beat, longer than comfortable. Then I said, I know why you're here. I want to be clear about something before we begin. This company belongs to me. Alina left it to me in full, with documentation that has already been reviewed by 3 separate legal teams. There is no version of this conversation where that changes. So if you came here to negotiate ownership, this meeting is going to be very short. My mother opened her mouth. I raised one hand, not aggressive, just certain. Let me finish. She closed her mouth. I also know about the lifestyle brand. I know how much has been spent on it and what it has returned. I know about father's contract situation, which I've already resolved, not for him, but because it was a straightforward problem with a clean solution. I know the state of the house and the accounts. Mia was watching me with an expression I couldn't entirely read. Something between hostility and fascination. My mother said, Reina, we're family. You made a choice about what family meant, I said. I heard you make it. I was 3 feet away. The room was very quiet. Here is what I'm prepared to offer, I continued. Not because I owe it, but because Alina would have wanted the name to stay intact. I will bring father's business under a consulting arrangement with one of our partner firms. It will stabilize. He won't lose it. In exchange, I have no further obligation to this family unit, financial or otherwise. Mia, I looked at her directly. I have no quarrel with you. You didn't create this situation. But you are not a Calloway in any sense that this company recognizes. That's not personal. That's legal. Mia looked at the table. My mother looked like she was deciding whether to cry or argue. She chose a third option I hadn't anticipated. She said, I know I hurt you. I looked at her. I know what I said that night. About having a daughter who felt like mine. Her voice was unsteady. I didn't know you heard. I know you didn't know, I said. That's part of the problem. She didn't have an answer for that. I stood. The meeting was over. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 3 weeks after that meeting, Constance called me at 6 a.m. She never called that early. I answered on the second ring. There's a man named Gerald Marsh, she said. You know the name. I did. Gerald was the grandson of the original Marsh co-founder, the other side of Calloway and Marsh. His grandfather and my grandfather had built the company together. When Alina restructured, Gerald's branch of the family had accepted a buyout. Or so the document said. He's filing a claim, Constance said. He says the buyout was coerced. He's found a lawyer willing to argue it. And Reina, a pause. He's been talking to Mia. I sat up. For how long? Long enough. He reached out to her after the chamber dinner. He's been positioning her as a sympathetic figure, the biological heir who was displaced. He wants to use her story to create a narrative around the company's legitimacy. This was not a simple family drama anymore. Gerald Marsh was not a disgruntled relative. He was a businessman who had been watching Calloway and Marsh grow under my direction and had decided he wanted a piece of it back. Mia was his vehicle. Her story, adopted away, displaced, never fully welcomed, was his leverage. It was a good play. I had to admit that. I called my lawyer. I called Constance. I spent the next 4 days reviewing every document in Alina's estate file, every record of the original buyout, every communication that had passed between the two families in the last 30 years. And I found something. Gerald's grandfather had not been coerced. He had, in fact, proposed the buyout himself, in writing, after a failed business venture that had put him in debt to a third party. The letter was in Aliner's files. Handwritten. Signed. Dated. Aliner had kept everything. She knew this day might come, Constance said when I showed her. She prepared me for it without telling me she was preparing me, I said. Constance looked at me, with something I had learned to recognize as approval. What do you want to do? I thought about it for a moment. I want to give Gerald one opportunity to withdraw, I said. Privately. With dignity. Because if he doesn't take it, what comes next is going to be very public and very permanent. Gerald did not withdraw. He issued a press statement through his lawyer claiming that Callaway and Marsh Holdings had been built on a disputed and potentially fraudulent transfer of assets, and that he intended to seek full arbitration. He named Mia in the statement as a displaced biological heir seeking rightful recognition. It ran in the business section of the regional paper. My phone lit up with messages from people in my network within the hour. I read the statement once. Then I called our PR contact, my lead attorney, and Constance in that order. I gave each of them a single instruction. Let me handle the narrative. I wrote a public response myself. Not through a lawyer. Not through a PR firm. In my own name from my own desk. It was 4 paragraphs. The first paragraph acknowledged the claim. The second paragraph outlined the documented history of the Marsh family's voluntary exit from the company, including the date and content of the original letter, which I noted had been authenticated by a third-party archivist and was available for review. The third paragraph stated that Aliner Callaway had maintained full legal control of the company for the duration of her life, had left it to a named heir with unambiguous documentation, and that no court had found or was likely to find merit in a claim to the contrary. The fourth paragraph said, "We wish Mr. Marsh and his family well. This matter is now in the hands of our legal team." I posted it on the company's official site and sent it to the same paper that had run his statement. Within 48 hours, 3 things happened. 1, 2 of Gerald's investors quietly distanced themselves from him. A disputed claim against a well-documented company is bad for business. 2, the acquiring partner group, the one I had connected with on the supplier situation, issued a statement confirming their continued confidence in Callaway and Marsh leadership. Unprompted. They did it because they wanted to. I had built that relationship carefully. 3, Mia called me. I almost didn't answer. I stared at her name on the screen for a long moment. Then I picked up. She didn't say hello. She said, "I didn't know he was going to use my name like that." I said, "Okay. I mean it." He told me he was helping me understand my family history. He never said anything about filing a legal claim, or she stopped. I saw the statement you published. The one with the letter. Yes. My name is in his press release. I know. A long pause. Can you take it out? Of the record somewhere. I don't want to be part of this. I thought about it. I can't remove what he published. But I can make sure that our legal response doesn't include your name in any way that implies you were a willing participant. If that's the truth, it's the truth. Then I'll have it noted. Another pause. Then she said something I hadn't expected. I never asked them to love me more than you. I didn't respond right away. I know, I said finally. I know you didn't. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a relationship. It was just an acknowledgement. 2 people who had been used as instruments in other people's choices, finally saying it plainly. She hung up first. I sat in my office for a few minutes, watching the city through the window. Then I went back to work. Gerald's arbitration claim was dismissed 4 months later. The tribunal reviewed the original Marsh buyout letter, the authenticated estate documents, and 3 decades of uncontested company records. They found no basis for the claim. Gerald was ordered to cover a portion of legal costs. The ruling ran in the same paper as his original statement. Longer piece this time. A business reporter had been following the story and wrote a feature on Callaway and Marsh, its history, Aliner's quiet management, and my emergence as the company's current director. She called me for comment. I gave her one line. Aliner Callaway built something worth protecting. I'm protecting it. The piece ran on a Sunday. By Monday, I had 11 new meeting requests in my inbox from developers, investors, and one very large architecture firm that had seen my name in the Hargrove competition coverage and wanted to discuss a partnership. My father read the article. He called me that afternoon. He said I had no idea. About your grandmother's company. About any of it. I know, I said. She never told me. A pause. She always liked you more than me. She knew what she was doing, I said. He was quiet for a long time. Then I'm sorry, Raina. For the letter. For Mia. For not, he stopped. For not looking at you. I let the words land. I heard you, I said. I'm not ready to be your daughter again. But I'm not your enemy. He said, that's more than I deserve. It probably was. But a leaner had taught me, without ever saying it directly, that grace and power are not opposites. That you can be formidable and still be human. That winning doesn't require anyone else to be destroyed. It just requires that you refuse to be diminished. I am 23 years old. I run a holding company that my grandmother built in silence for 12 years and left to me because she saw something in a 15-year-old girl that no one else was paying attention to. I graduated with honors from the best architecture program in the region. I have a seat at tables that people spend entire careers trying to reach. I have a mentor who taught me that silence is a strategy and patience is a weapon. I have never begged anyone to see me. I have never chased approval from people who decided I wasn't worth it. I speak calmly. I set boundaries. I do what I say I will do. And when I walked out of my parents' house at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday with $340 and a scholarship and a box of what I thought was jewelry, I was already someone. They just weren't paying attention. They chose the fake heiress. So I returned with power. Not to punish them, they're doing that well enough on their own. Not to prove something to the people who doubted me, they're not important enough for that to be the point. I returned because Alina Calloway looked at me across a room for 15 years and decided I was the one worth betting on. And I will not let her be wrong.